Boom. Everybody, thanks very much for coming back to the Pigsty. We've got After Party for IQ tonight. We've got joined by Dave. We've got Spartan Theology. We've got Bill. And we've been very privileged tonight to have Doc Savage, first time here. So, everybody, thanks very much for coming. Somebody else there?
Thanks for having me on. I haven't been here in a minute, so.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks very much.
We so should have just kept quiet then and trolled him.
It's broken. Someone turn the volume up. Did it really get that loud earlier? When I turned it up and you just complained.
Yeah, it was horrific, dude. The over gain was so bad that it was causing an echo. It was awful, terrible.
Right. Oh, madness. At least it's working now. Anyway, that's the main thing.
You got it all right. You got it right in the end. To be fair, you did get it right in the end. The balance after that was actually very good. The problem was that IQ initially was much louder than you, and then you turned yourself up, and the gain was just like, whoa.
Yeah, I turned it up like 110%. I doubled that shit.
Yeah.
Oh. No, so if anyone doesn't know who IQ is, he's Moderator Extreme. We've got Dave, who used to be Moderator Extreme, who's trying to stretch up into channel with questions. We've got Spartan Theology in the bottom corner, who's a Christian and doesn't like young earth creationism, so he's alright, we'll accept him. We've got Bill working on a channel, and we've got Doc in the bottom corner who works. What is your speciality, Doc?
My first degree is medical microbiology, my doctorate's biochemistry, and my career's been in research and development, now in the industry of vaccines and biopharmaceuticals, also with bits of emergency and pandemic planning. So I'm essentially here for any of the science backwash from the public health situation.
So basically what I got from that is you need to get off the stream and get back to work.
That's really good. That's good.
What that means is this is the man that I want well rested when he is working.
Yeah,
I have been working, and I'm well rested, and all is good. But at this kind of time, people get scared, and the best way to deal with that is to have an accurate conversation about the things that scare you.
Yeah,
Indeed,
no, that's
panic
totally
is
a joke. That's really
panic
cool.
is useless.
no, it doesn't
I'm
achieve
not a fan
anything.
of panic.
We've Mama Atheist would be a scientist in our little group here, and she's done astrophysics and climate change and stuff like that. And she is adamant about the masks and the gloves. She says that the gloves are far more effective than the masks. Would you agree with that statement, Doc?
I use both and eye protection every time I go outside my house. The best approach overall is to assume that you are infectious and that everyone else is infectious too, and then you're covered from both sides.
Yeah, I'd put it quite well. I think it was last week. I'd sent out a tweet says 2 things that will keep you healthy in the coming weeks: stay away from people and treat everything like it's covered in bird shit.
Do you use disposable masks and gloves?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, I figured.
They're
See,
having
that makes sense to me. Disposable, and you're replacing them every time you go out.
Yeah.
Totally makes sense. Well worth it.
Yeah.
But people that just use the same mask and the same set of gloves over and over and over and over again, it's pretty. So it seems to me so pointless, because you're getting the shit on the mask anyway. You know, it's like. So then my only argument is that there is a definite shortage of PPE in the UK at the moment. I don't know about the rest of the world. I think there just is in general. So my argument would be that you, in your situation, you require it as part of your day-to-day job. Me, on the other hand, I don't, because there's a shortage. I don't use it just because I don't want to be taking it away from people that actually need it. Does that make sense?
I think that makes a lot of sense, and it's an admirable position. And I stress that I use PPE in my regular everyday life, because we're still in that kind of situation in the Netherlands. Yeah. But the advice I give to my elderly parents is social isolation, which is critical. And wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands. Treat your house like it's at the ICU. You wash your hands when you go in, you wash your hands when you leave. And that's pretty much it,
What about...
That's what I've been doing at...
Sorry, go on ahead, Bill. Finish
Carry
your
on,
saying.
Matt. No, I was just going to say that's what I've been doing at my nan's house. I'm my nan's primary carer at the moment. So every time I go in, I wash my hands. Every time I leave, I wash my hands. I make sure she washes her hands. And I regularly use disinfectant wipes to wipe down all the door handles in the entire flat. Like every day, every couple of days, disinfect all the door handles to make sure that everything she touches is not, you know.
That's great.
Here's something that I've been pushing to a lot of people, is that when it comes to disinfectant wipes, you need to double check what you're using. And there's something called dwell time when it comes to disinfectants.
Yep.
A lot of those disinfectant wipes, especially a lot of the lower end ones, they require like a 10-minute dwell time to kill this virus. The surface needs to remain wet for 10 minutes. There's a lot of chemicals out there that requires a lot less time, and you can make a bleach solution. There's a lot of stuff that's out there, but you need to double check on the chemicals that you're using and how long the surface needs to remain wet, or you're kind of doing some good.
Yeah,
My recommendation would be hot soapy water, like you would use to manually wash your dishes. Nothing more complex than that.
Yeah, I went out and bought a couple of bars of soap, and I was, why aren't you buying this right and that and there? And there's bars of soap, just good soap.
Yeah, I mean, anything with a surfactant that can get through a membrane is what you need. So that'll do it. But you're right. Bleach solution, vinegar solution, all of these things are effective. But the best thing is to not inhale the stuff from contact.
What there's a shortage, as Bill pointed out, everywhere really about the PPI, and my father works for a big pharmaceutical company that makes mainly veterinary supplies, but they had an access, so we've got some of them that were given to a friend of mine that works in an old folks home. Let me see if I can get this right. And them, if they're any good.
Yeah, but they're going to be better than nothing. That's for sure.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
but we've got a couple of boxes of them to give them, so every little bit helps. The only thing he's asked for is a picture of everybody using them and a thank you.
I mean, to be very clear, even an N95 mask, which is like the high-end stuff, what that means is it's going to filter out 95% of things above a certain size. So it's still not a guarantee, but it will be a help in the same way as, wearing a bandana is a useful thing.
Yeah, well, it's an old folks home, so
yeah.
There's, I think, 18 of them in it at the minute. Nobody's really got any bad scares, but obviously nobody's allowed in or out. Yeah,
that's where it gets really bad. If this gets into an environment like that, you're losing 30, 40, 50% of the people.
Yeah.
And that's a very real prospect.
Here, before we had the lockdown in Northern Ireland, I work in the public sector dealing with people, and they were, it's not that bad, it's not that bad. And as you clearly don't, they just didn't understand exponential growth. And try and explain that to them. I used an example of bacteria in a swimming pool that takes 60 days to fill, and most of them said that it was half full in and around mid-30s, and it's like, no, it's half full at 59. It's like we're in the first 40 days, we are not noticing. Once it goes past the 40 days, the 50 days, you're starting to get fucked now, like. And
you're right. And if I can comment on the mortality rate, the overall number is like 3 or 4%, which sounds like a low number, but it's a misleading number. It's not really 3 or 4% overall. It's progressively from age 60 to 80, 30%, 50%, and 70%. So
it's the low average. Yeah.
That's a huge number in that limited population. So guard your granny.
Yeah, that's why I'm trying to be super careful at the moment, because
you're doing everything right. Just to be clear,
my nan,
as far as I know.
Yeah, she lives in like assisted accommodation, and literally I'm one of only about 2 or 3 people that are actually allowed access to the accommodation at the moment. Brilliant. Other than a few other carers. Like we're all being very careful about it.
Well, it sounds like she's got a good guy taking care of her, and as far as I can tell, you're doing everything exactly as you should. So well done.
He even brought her on to Dave's critical questions there last
I
week.
did. She enjoyed that, mate. She had so much fun. I will do that again one day.
Yeah,
she really
do.
did have so much fun.
What
Hey, I
get
don't
from
have
people-
I don't have any grannies left, so I mean, if I could borrow her from time to time, that would be great.
You can borrow mine. Mine's
Yeah,
as
for
evil as
sure.
sin. Mine fucks people off and tells she on her 80th birthday she was like, "That's it. I don't need to be nice no more."
That's brilliant. But isn't it lovely when they get to that age? Eh?
I joke that when the Grim Reaper comes for her, obviously she believes in all that, and I've said to her, I said, when the Grim Reaper comes for you, Granny, you'll tell him to fuck off as well.
You know, my mum's in her 80s now, and she's still a little old lady, sort of blue hair and lavender smelling. She was thrown out of the over 80s craft circle for making a collage that said Trump is a cunt. You know, with flower petals. You know, they're all making Jesus is Lord or whatever. And she's like, "Do you like mine, ladies?" Out.
That is so beautiful. I love it.
You had a show with Scientist Mel, Doc. Are you bringing that back, or is that on hiatus with everything that's happening at the minute, I would assume?
Yeah, it was a great deal of fun doing it, and we did kind of 20 episodes. And I had to move on to other things, and Mel's direction is more towards education, which is brilliant. But my persona on the internet is darker and harsher than was a good fit as we progressed. So yeah, we've moved on, but she's a friend of the show, and she's doing great work.
Yeah, no, big love for Scientist Mel here. We all do appreciate everything she keeps doing. Like, and she doesn't promote herself enough. The stuff she does that's not just online, you know, actually for the local schools and stuff like that. She does do an awful lot for our community.
Yeah, I mean,
That's actually how I know about you, Doc, is through the stuff that you did with Scientist Mel. So,
Yeah,
I mean, kudos to you. Those are good stuff.
It was great fun, but you know, to be clear, I have a sort of soft but present boundary between in real life and the Doc Savage thing, and people pretty much respect that. But I stand by everything that I've said. But some of the things I say on psychic vampires are intentionally dark. But it's stuff that I say in my own head, but don't have the opportunity to say in real life. So it's a very, very valuable therapy and catharsis for me, dealing with dangerous idiots online.
Which you will
Indeed.
find an awful lot of, especially if you reach far enough into America. Like,
Oh yeah, but we go deep. I mean, we find the real dark ones, like the guy with the 120 gallons of aged piss in his barn. You know, we look for the David Lynch characters more than the borderlines.
yeah, you've made it all dark now. We're all afraid.
Yeah. Why don't we talk more about virology so I can sound like a
So the world's dying, yeah. Oh,
I mean, if the world's a forest, it's having a bit of a fire. And that's a thing that happens. We're overdue for one. Every 100 years or so, this happens.
yeah.
And I've very frequently said I don't wake up at night worrying about Ebola. I wake up at night worrying about flu or something like flu that will do exactly what we're seeing now. So this is an expected event, an event that has been planned for, but not a planned event.
Oh, go on. When I've been talking to people about this, when would you say the first studies were released that predicted the spread of influenza-type virus coming out? Because I was quoting 60s and 70s that we had reliable models.
Yeah, around about that time, because virology was becoming a thing at that time, in terms of, you know, imaging and molecular genetics to a limited degree. But we've had an understanding of how pandemics work from way, way back. So certainly in the modern era, since the 1916 pandemic, definitely. But I mean, it's long been understood that because of the nature of viruses like this, they change really fast. They can recombine between species and spread really easily between people. That the thing that was going to happen would be probably an RNA virus that did both of these things. And it has happened multiple times. HIV, for instance, is a very similar kind of story, although a very different kind of virus. So yeah, in the emergency planning, this kind of thing is, top of the list.
Yeah. In your opinion, do you think the positive tests following negative tests are a result of mutation or a result of failure in the negative tests?
I really don't know. I haven't had any hands-on experience with the tests. If you're looking at a direct test for the presence of the virus, that's one thing. And if you're looking at an antibody test that indicates a virus has been present and you've responded to it, it's very different. So I can't really answer the question.
Do we have active antibody tests at the moment?
They're not fully deployed, so I don't think that's actually a thing happening at the moment. But a lot of blood is being taken from a lot of people, and what they look for is an antibody presence against antigens in the virus.
Do you know what I've forgotten the technical term. I'm going to say failure, but that's not what I mean. But the failure rate on the detecting on the main test is?
No, don't know.
False positive. Or false negative. Yeah.
My aunt was saying that, to be honest, we are quite lucky in a sense that although this is a lethal virus and it is dangerous, she said we're quite lucky that it is relatively benign, because it does mean that different countries can react to it in different ways, and we can assess what the best way to react to it was. And then in the future, if a virus rears its head that has the mortality rate of something like septicemic plague, for example, which untreated is 100% mortality rate, which she says inevitably it will do at some point down the line. That might be hundreds of years yet, but at some point it will. And she says we're quite lucky because this will allow us to put plans in place for the future, that when something really nasty rears its head, we're actually prepared for it.
Yeah. Learning is great, and you're right. I mean, minor correction. Bubonic plague is bacterial, but that aside, your analogy is perfectly correct. And
it was. I mean, it was just the mortality rate thing, really.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. And a key aspect to this and epidemiology is mobility. So in the case of the plague, the mobile agent was the rodent and the flea on the rodent, and the bacteria in the flea. And in this case, you get this illness, you can walk around with it for a couple of weeks and spread it all around. So pathogenicity and transmissibility are the two aspects that we need to be very cautious of.
What is your thoughts on the way that the UK here has reacted? Do you think that it's going to turn out well for us? Dave put me into a reading from the Guardian that didn't look so well for the UK.
I think we're going to struggle to keep it under 40,000 deaths.
Yeah, I think that's very accurate. So what I've seen has been really good in many ways and really poor in other ways. And unfortunately, this is like having a swimming pool and allowing people to piss, but only in one area of the pool. So the initial response was good, and a lot of communities are still doing it and should do. But if it's relaxed in the next couple of months, what will happen is another flare-up in September or October. And there's more probability of it spreading back into the most vulnerable populations at that time.
Well, this is where I am. There is nothing. There is within 5 miles of me. There are no cases, which is odd because I'm going to tell you vaguely where I am. I'm right next to Arrow Park, which is where the first quarantine was.
I mean, if you live in a city, you're going to be more at risk for sure. But what has happened in basically every other pandemic, and in specific instance, the 1916, was a flare-up at this time of year, then a low level of infection transmitted through the community, and everything's fine in the summer, and then people go back inside in autumn and well, in that case, 40 million people died. Although that was a very much more pathogenic virus than this.
So, Doc, you said you're in the Netherlands.
That's right. Yeah.
So I
It
was
sound very Dutch.
no. I was going to say a little bit of a slightly side thing, not really related. But did your job get moved because of Brexit? Are you in the Netherlands now because your job got moved? Because I saw a thing
a
on
good point.
the news earlier about one of the side effects of this being that one of the viral, something to do with virology and all that sort of stuff, was moved from the UK to the Netherlands because of Brexit.
It didn't affect me in that way. I'm freelance, so I am a kind of company,
Right,
and I
okay.
contract myself to other companies that need a kick in the arse, to be honest. The Brexit situation has made it a little bit more complex, and I have to write one or two more letters when I move to a different country. But being a person of, well, having all the privilege cards, that it hasn't really impacted me, but it would be more difficult if I was a plumber, for instance.
Yeah, that's good. That's good that it hasn't.
Well, we were limited here now. My daughter does live 2 hours away from me, and as I say, her mother works in an old folks home. I stayed here after I was furlonged for, I think it was close to 13 days before I went down, and then I spent a week with them, and then they're coming up on Monday to spend a week with me. I know it's not the best thing in the world, but if anyone ever has kids, trying to be away from your child is very difficult.
Yeah, I think hearing what I'm hearing, you've made a balanced approach to the risk and the benefits, and I think you're doing exactly the right thing.
Oh yeah, well, as I say, she works in an old folks home. Her mother runs 2 old folks homes. I could be accountable for maybe 50 deaths if I bring that up there. One of them being her mother or the daughter's grandfather, which, yeah, it needed to be done. It is. She was petrified, which is why the first week I went to her, because as people over panic, the way she was coming across was like a zombie apocalypse. It's like, they're not going to smash your windies down and eat your brains. You know, it's... No. Wash your hands before you get into the car. It's the same as going to the shop a half mile up the road or going to work a mile up the road as it is to drive into my house, provided when you come in, you wash your hands as well.
Exactly. And to be clear, the huge issue that we can avoid is overwhelming the healthcare infrastructure in individual places by spreading this out over a long period. So if everyone gets sick, and 40% of the community's out of circulation, everything breaks down. Mm-hmm. So let's avoid that, you know. And essentially that's what American cities, all of them, are going through at various stages. New York is beginning to come out of it, Every other city is going into it, without exception, at the moment.
Yeah, I'm in Houston, so we're seeing it. Like, it's almost sometimes seems like it's not getting as bad, but then we saw in the news today, like 5 days ago, there were like 1,300 cases, and then now today it was like 5,900 cases or something like that. So it's getting pretty bad.
About a week ago, there was the estimate of 200,000 deaths, which was very much a best case estimate at that point. Using the same methodology, the best case estimate last night was 442,000 deaths. And that's if nobody else gets infected.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, we've only got, I think, 79 or 81, I think it was, intensive unit beds in Northern Ireland. Like.
So, I mean, the basic methodology is you add up all the dead folks, multiply that number by 1,000 to give you an indication of the actual number of infected people, and then take 3 to 4% of that number. That's how the 200,000 was calculated, and that's the sum I did last night.
So to people I hear that say things like, oh, those numbers, like, that you're saying, like that 30, 40, 50% of like these old people, that's just because like they're dying of other things and they're just like attributing it to COVID.
No.
What would you say to somebody who said that?
Well, okay, let's do a specific case. My mum's 80. She has underlying health conditions like all 80-year-olds do. And she might die tomorrow or in 10 or 15 years, even 20. But if she gets COVID, she has a very good chance of dying within the next 3 to 5 days. So did her heart condition kill her, or did the virus kill her? I don't know if it's irrelevant. You know, when it comes down to that, there is one mercy to it, that it would be less sad for an elderly person to pass away than a child. I think I can make peace with that.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
But it would rip through their entire population, and it would be a massacre. So whether it was the underlying conditions which might have killed them eventually, it's certainly the virus that accelerates that process very, very, very strongly.
See, I read a study that a lot of the deaths weren't being, equated to the COVID because of that. You know, a lot of old folks' deaths in old folks' homes were being put down as the heart condition, being put down as the underlying condition that killed them, rather being exactly the reasoning that you said. Like.
Yeah. I think early on that definitely happened, but this is essentially a notifiable disease now. So attending physicians will definitely be recording it as such. And, you know, in some communities, people die at home without a lot of medical supervision as well. And throughout the developing world, and to some extent Southeast Asia and the Russian Federation, we'll never know the impact.
Well, it's definitely for sure it's going to be remembered by a lot of people. Anybody over the age of 8 or 9 is probably going to remember this for the rest of their life. Like, it is worldwide. You know, SARS happened and things like that before, but being as widespread worldwide as this, it's definitely going to be something that everybody's going to remember.
Oh, yeah, precisely. And I mean, people like me have the advantage perhaps of having lived with the invisible and sometimes threatening world of microbiology as a reality forever. It's part of my paradigm. But it must be terrifying if, you know, you don't have a background in this and it's all an abstract concept. You know, what the fuck is happening? Well, it's as natural as a volcano happening or an earthquake or, you know, the tides. And yeah, we've been due for quite some time.
Well, that's it. A lot of people have said that this is coming, and you know, people like yourself who's definitely known it's coming, and anybody who has done any sort of looking about and things like that, anybody who just has a desire to learn will know that this has been expected. And if people do not know what's going on, the mass, people as a mass are stupid. Now, I'm not to put people in as an individual down, because people as an individual are a completely different thing, but mass of people just follow what the rest of the sheep are doing. If that man goes to the shop, why can't I go to the shop? And then it turns out everybody's going to the shop. That's probably why we ended up with no toilet paper.
Well, again, it's relevant expertise, you know. I don't know dick all about engines, and my mechanic doesn't know anything about immunology, but I need him and he needs me, you know. So I just try and demystify. So, I mean, I've heard some interesting conspiracies, but I wonder if any of the rest of the panel have any questions about that.
Well, I've heard that it's a conspiracy from the Chinese to wipe out all their old people due to overpopulation. I've heard it's a conspiracy to cover up the bad sales between, I think it's Australia and America's crop sales this year. It was to try and distract from that.
The stupidest one I heard was from an American, and they said the Chinese had created it in an effort to destabilize their economy. And I was like, look, your country owes China $1.7 trillion. It holds $1.7 trillion of US debt. Why the fuck would they want to destabilize your economy when they've got no chance of getting that money back? You stupid people.
Yeah, and I listen to all of these things and I'm fascinated by them, not by the factual content, but by the ingenuity of them, when reality is much cooler and much better understood. So you've got a wet market full of weird shit like pangolins and raccoons running around, badgers, an elephant in the corner. You've got this massive mixing pot of bacteria and viruses and blood and shit everywhere. Someone cuts their hand and bingo, something new arrives. And we know exactly how. And we know that this has happened. It happened multiple times with HIV. It's happened multiple times with viruses like this. It's really cool. You don't need like a massive conspiracy because nature will fuck you up.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And actually, I actually think that the Chinese government, although we won't go into the whole situation of the Chinese government, but I think ultimately, I mean, we don't really know, but it seems to me that from the information I have, that they've actually reacted to it in probably the best way they could. Genuinely, like they've done quite a good job.
How accurate and complete the information is, I don't know, but everything I've seen has suggested they took this very seriously very early on because they're pragmatic. They know about shit like this. And I hope that they begin to revise. It's complex because there's a requirement economically for wild meat, and it's legislated that the people are allowed to do that. But that really has to change.
I saw something earlier on.
Yeah.
Sorry, carry on.
No, just that it's a super, super high risk thing, like raising ducks and pigs together. You really don't want to be doing that. So they can work it out. But again, it's an economic requirement for an enormous number of people to do this.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I saw something earlier on that was saying that the central government had now decided to enforce by law and ban the eating of dogs, as an example. I don't know how true that is, but if that is the case, that is one positive that's come from it. But obviously, the problem that the Chinese government has is that, like, they have made a lot of these things illegal anyway. But as you say, the trade continues illegally because of the economic requirement, because people have to feed themselves.
Yeah.
And I hope that they can sort of provide some sort of education and some help in whatever way necessary, so that these wild markets can clean up their act to an extent. Do you know what I mean? And I understand that's an economic thing that needs help.
That is a perfect statement, because if they clean literally up their act, then they reduce the risk dramatically.
Yeah, absolutely. What isn't helpful is the racist, delusional conspiracy theory nonsense of, it's because they eat this, they eat that, they eat the other, disgusting, right? Well, hang on a minute. First of all, eating meat is a cultural thing. How are you going to say, if you eat cows, for example, to say that they shouldn't eat dogs, although I agree with it, is essentially hypocrisy, because it's just another animal, right? It's just culturally a different thing.
The Hindus think we're all monsters because,
I mean, just because we keep them as pets, we have this, stigma on eating dogs. And I guess from a sentimental perspective, I understand that view. But I mean, if we're going to eat one animal, it should not be illegal to eat a different animal just because somebody has an emotional attachment to that species.
Precisely correct.
But and Doc, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but for the example of banning eating dogs from a viral perspective does absolutely nothing, because when it comes to zoonotic events, we already interact with dogs all the time globally. So just not eating them anymore would not do shit for preventing virus transmission, at least zoonotically. It's the odd species that they're eating and interacting with that we normally wouldn't even be around is where we're finding those intermediary hosts to be able to transmit viruses that we've not seen. Is that about right?
is perfectly correct. And more specifically, big rooms with guts and blood and shit and lots of different species all mooshed up together.
Yeah, because it's real easy for a really exotic animal to find an intermediary host that we're also interacting with.
Yeah. Especially with RNA viruses, because they copy themselves really poorly, which means that every generation is basically massively variable. So if an infectious event occurs, there's some little character in there that's going to take hold and do something. So evolution gets real fast in that kind of environment.
Somebody's bound to come in contact with a mutation that just happens to fit our slot.
Yeah, precisely. I mean, there are boundaries around that based on structure-function relationships, but it's like scattershot. And if you get one pellet, then you become the next buckshot canister, you know.
Mm.
And as I've said, I mean, we've mapped this back with HIV to simian immunodeficiency virus and specifically cut counter events quite accurately. So we know that this has happened multiple times and has brought about, for instance, different variants of HIV. And we know it's happened with SARS and MERS, same principle.
I had a cat as a child that died of FIV.
Mm-hmm. Similar virus. But again, adapted to that particular species. And the thing about SIV is it's a different kind of illness. It affects chimps differently to HIV in people, but it's essentially the same viral hardware.
It's all very interesting.
So it's a global effort right now to control what is very likely a zoonotic event caused by that mandate of being able to feed this vast population in China. And I understand that from like a humanitarian perspective where they've got to eat, and when that was mandated, it was almost kind of necessary because they were not able to feed everybody, and mandating that allowed people to be able to feed themselves and everybody to be able to afford that. Like, you know, they go out and they catch all these wild animals and they gut them and they sell them, and they're able to bring in money to feed their own families. And it was economically sound, but looking from a biological perspective, this is causing a global problem. So if we're ready to take a global mop, so to speak, with it to clean up this mess, would it be so much easier and so many lives would be saved by taking a global effort to feed the people in China versus a global effort to mop up the problems that causes?
I'm all for feeding hungry people, but if they have a slightly higher cleanliness standard and control standard in the market, have at it, you know.
The really disappointing.
Yeah, whether
thing
it's not
about
it's
this
feeding
is,
them. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Bill.
I was going to say the amount of food that Western countries throw away on like a daily, weekly, monthly basis. If that food was redistributed, a very large proportion of the world's population could actually be fed. Like it's a possibility. It is an act. You know, it is within the realms of reality.
Agreed.
It's just that it's political. There's so much political division that it's difficult to act upon it. I mean, really, it would need a one world government to do that, and obviously, most people are going to be opposed to that because conspiracy.
Well, Bill, to be very dark for a moment, if you want to use a biological weapon, you don't use a virus. You use food. It's been used in military and political tactics for as long as things have been eating.
Absolutely.
It's used as a motivation. It's used as a punishment. And it's very controllable, and it affects everyone the same way. So you don't need to get all fancy and, I'm nefariously releasing Ebola. No, you just need to starve the fuck out of a community.
History has taught us this.
Yeah, precisely. It's real simple.
Hello, Randolph.
Do you have an opinion, MathPig?
Hello.
Me? No, not at the minute. It's all everything. I'm just sitting and listening. It's just far beyond my field, man. Far beyond my field.
Oh, you don't think you have any history of food being used to control the populace?
Oh no, I agree with you in that stance, but that's a long conversation because I'm a Protestant atheist. So.
Does that come back to the?
In saying that, I descend.
How many potatoes does it take to kill an Irishman? Jake?
We're Scottish descendants, so we're probably the bad people.
I think when the comment about people objecting to a one world government because of conspiracies, certainly that's a reason that some people use. For me, the problem I would have with a one world government is nothing to do with conspiracy. It's more of a practical one. If there is a problem with the justice system, which we see in pretty much every country today, even here in Canada, our justice system is not perfect. We try to be, but we're not perfect. And we recognize that, and we're trying to improve. And then somebody is considered a criminal under that justice system when really they're not. Where can they run to if there's one government for the whole world? Yeah, that's the problem.
I suppose that's fair.
That's one of the benefits we have with having multiple countries, is that there's an out for people who really have a good reason for needing to leave because of some injustice in their own country. And I think we need to make sure, if there's a one world government, that this kind of scenario can be taken care of in a proper way. And I just don't see that this part coming up in the conversations.
I am very much in favor of local government, but global oversight. So I like the UN, I like the World Health Organization, and I wish they were more involved. Sort of, we have our local state and our local setup, but
the United Nations,
it's the fan we get.
Yeah, the United Nations overall is a really good idea. Unfortunately, they have made some very bad mistakes too. For example, they put Saudi Arabia in charge of the Human Rights Commission for a minimum of 2 years in a row, and had a lot of complaints about it. And people raised a lot of valid concerns, and they whitewashed it with a stupid letter supporting that. Now, to me, it should be very obvious to the people running the United Nations that if you have not signed on to the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, which is what the Human Rights Commission is all about, then they have no business having any votes on there, and they have no business chairing it. Saudi Arabia did not sign that declaration.
You are willing to fight them.
Sorry?
You can't exclude them from the opportunity.
I'm not saying exclude them. I'm not saying exclude them. They can be part of it. They can be part of it. They just can't guide it. If they're not going to sign the Declaration of Human Rights, they have no business guiding the Human Rights Commission. Because if you've got the people running the Human Rights Commission,
they can't sign the Declaration of Human Rights because it goes directly against their religion.
They made up a Cairo Accord, which they claim is better. That's nonsense. No, they're being manipulative.
Yes, of course they are. Diplomatic organization.
To straddle what I'm hearing, I don't hear a disagreement.
No, we're not. We're not disagreeing. We always do.
which is great, and I agree. I mean, but my vision of what the UN should be isn't what it is in all respects. But conceptually, that's where my politics lies. In a room, we all agree on 90% of everything. Let's try and hash out the other things that matter and leave the rest of it alone. And who needs some rice today?
How do you deal with a country that won't play ball on something huge?
And this is a huge issue.
Inclusive.
Yeah, I agree. And I can't answer the question fully, but I'll say that an essential thing that must be maintained is dialogue and the opportunity to do it, and a forum in which it can happen.
But they do not need voting power in order to participate in a forum.
Precisely. I
And
agree
that's
with
the
that.
problem I have with them.
Yes,
Is
but
that they allowed that to
who
happen.
decides?
They
who
do
decides?
not have human rights in our best interest when they're doing stuff like that. And that is my big dissatisfaction with the United Nations. I have nothing but bad to say for them about this particular issue. Other things, I like what they're doing. This, I do not trust the United Nations when it comes to human rights because they've demonstrated they're not trustworthy.
Hear, hear.
The EU has a better record on human rights than the United Nations does.
Yes.
And it's still not perfect, but the EU's human rights record generally is better than the United Nations is.
Question
Same
from
can
the
be said
chat,
for
a wee
Canada
bit
and
off.
the US.
Well, sorry, I have a question just from the chat before it gets completely out of control because it was probably asked at a time when it was mentioned. But what do you think of the Google and the coronavirus contract tracing software within Bluetooth?
For me, fair enough. It's a toy. Assume you're infectious. Assume everyone else is infectious. Behave accordingly.
Did I see Sal backstage?
Yes.
I'll
Do-
quite
do I-
happily bow out. if Sal
I
wants to jump in
myself
and
also.
talk to people.
Doc, it was very interesting hearing you talk about COVID-19 and coronavirus. Thank you for all the information.
Oh,
Yeah,
you're
if we could
welcome.
maybe
If there are
schedule
any
something and
questions-
give you a whole hour, man, all to yourself, and we can just, it would be great to be able to tap your brain and get that advantage. Like.
That would be
I
a
think that'd be
privilege,
great.
and I'm more interested in answering questions that people have to demystify, what is a real thing that's a quite well understood thing.
I have a question about coronavirus, COVID-19. I know there's differences between the two. It's a bit of a nuance, but my understanding is that there are a number of strains of it going around right now, and a few of those strains is lethal. Is this a correct understanding that I have?
I don't know if the data really support that just yet. It may well be the case, and the individual strains will be different. But in each infection, there are about 90 different variables. The health of the patient, constitution, genotype, and so on. So another thing to be very aware of is that the COVID-19 virus is a constantly changing, constantly and rapidly evolving, moving target like flu is, and that's why we get a different flu vaccine every year.
Yeah.
Universal precautions diminish the chance of being infected or spreading the infection, and that denies fuel to the fire that's presently burning through our population.
Okay. Yeah. So it's still to be determined.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be absolutely certain with you. I mean, this is an RNA virus. Every generation of it comes up with weird differences. Most of them won't get passed on, some of them do. So essentially, how you define strain is really what it comes down to.
Which is exceptionally troubling. If we do develop a vaccine for it, it's going to be... there's a chance with hundreds of thousands of people being infected, it's going to be worthless within a year, or
Possibly.
very, very limited.
Possibly.
Well,
don't know. We don't know that for a fact, because often what happens is a virus can change, but the most important aspects of its pathogenicity or infectivity can't change. They're kind of locked in.
And do remember that the old strains still persist as well. They don't completely go away. Just because sometimes there's evolution that they change completely or change a lot, and then there's others that change very little at all or not at all. And, look, this is why we still have vaccines for very old diseases that are pretty much eradicated, because the vast majority of the planet takes those vaccines. But we stop taking those, we'll start seeing a resurgence of many of these diseases again.
And you're absolutely correct. So at the moment, there are some unanswered questions, but looking at convalescent serum, you find out what your body has actually reacted to. And it's a relatively simple experiment to do that. And then those parts that cause the response in your body are used in the vaccine. So you're giving it what it needs to generate the response that's protective. So we're not guessing with this. And very often it will be down to 1 or 2 epitopes, so a very small fraction of a particular protein. You make an antibody to that, the virus can't get into your cell. So yeah, we really don't know. It could be that people who are infected are immune for a period of time. It's most probably the case, which doesn't mean, as you said, Randolph, quite correctly, that we're out of the woods and this is gone for good. That's not the case.
That's why the vaccines will always be important once they're developed.
Yep.
Can you suggest, maybe, I don't know if it's an easy thing to do, but is it possible to put it in an easy term for people to remember to the distinction between coronavirus and COVID-19?
Well, COVID-19 is a specific variant of coronaviruses. Coronaviruses are, if coronavirus is dog, COVID-19 is one particular breed of dog.
Okay, so coronavirus is the family of viruses that
Family of
includes COVID-19.
Correct.
Okay.
And they're called coronaviruses because when you grow them and they bud out of cells, they look like little crowns coming up. So
They don't look like the beer.
these are things that, yes, they do exist. Yes, we have seen them, and yes, they do vote. It says on the tin, you know.
Another question from Bruno in the chat is the ACE2 spike protein. Do you think there could be latent virus like the herpes virus?
Yeah, it's possible, but not likely for a virus of this type. This kind of virus has a segmented genome, and latency often involves, if not invariably involves, integration of a genome in a single part into the host genome. So possible, not probable, but we don't know.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Shout out to Bruno as well. He knows me in real life.
It's a really good question.
Well, he knows me in real life. He's actually, not to make a big deal out of it, but that's my brother in the chat. So I appreciate the first time.
I was going to say, is it your bro?
Yeah, no, it doesn't look like him.
Should we call him?
Right, nobody ask him questions. Everybody end the stream. We're ending the stream.
Should we call him?
Say hi, hello, Bruno. How's it going?
Yeah.
Should we call Bruno Brother Pig?
No, Bruno. Bruno's not even his real name, even though everybody has been calling him Bruno for maybe the guts of 20 years.
I see. If Bruno, if you're interested in the ACE2 protein, have a look at the CCAM1 receptor signaling system. It's a thing that COVID does to some degree, and that system is associated with specific immunosuppression. And it was kind of my baby back in the mid-90s, late 90s in Toronto. So it may be of interest to you, and it's something that I have an interest and concern about in terms of acquired immunity.
No, well, that would be very good. I'll maybe talk to him and see if he wants to, because he seems a wee bit more versed in this topic than I would be, and maybe possibly get the two of you on, or the three of us together, and we can have a chat or sort something. Or I know he works from home and I'm off on furlong. I'm lucky enough being in the UK. I get 80% of my wages, so I'm in furlong for 2 months. So yeah, we'll definitely sort something like. If anybody else has any other questions for Doc, or even though it's IQ stream, has anybody got any questions for IQ?
Well, I wanted to personally thank Doc for coming on. I'm usually quiet when I'm listening. There's a treasure trove of information. When I encounter somebody that I can learn from, I open my ears and shut my mouth unless I have a direct question. And everybody's got some good questions rolling out, so I have no need to ask him anything. So, thank you, Doc, for coming in. You've been a treat.
It's a pleasure, and that's really kind. And again, it's just one of those times where my very specific area of interest is useful information. So I'm glad to be able to help out. And with that, I'll sign off for now.
Useful and helpful.
Thanks. Any questions that come up, feel free to reach out, get in touch.
Yeah, definitely. We'll make the motions and get everybody in contact. There's always the Pigsty Discord, and
For sure.
Knox telling me to end the stream as well. He's like, "Stop streaming. I'm trying to work." Okay, right.
Well,
That's gonna happen.
it's been
No, I really appreciate everybody coming on a Sunday, especially because I know that a lot of us in the community watch the ACA, and special shout out to IQ because, as we mentioned earlier, he does mod for a lot of the ACA stuff, and I don't know if he's going to shout at me at the minute, but the man's on his phones in a van, all right, to be here tonight, so massive.
Whenever you encounter me, I'm typically on my phones somewhere. It's raining, but not inside the van. I'm good. It's comfy. And I'm actually modding the Atheist Experience right now on another phone, so I'm missing nothing, man.
Well, that's a double convenience.
Well, we lost Doc, but massive shout out to Doc. We're going to make some connections there and hopefully get a stream. We'll get a wee bit more information. We'll all be able to just tap his brain. And huge thank you to IQ for even allowing us to do that. I really do appreciate you, man, because I know it was your after party, like.
Oh man, it's my honor just being here. Thanks for having me.
Really do.
It's always great listening to you. You have so much wisdom to share. It's and you're a clear thinker. Really appreciate your input and your perspectives on things. It's sometimes very highly educational too.
Well, that just
it comes from when somebody calls you out on your shit. Listen.
Yeah,
That's good advice.
that's
Again.
it. Take no shit, speak it as it comes, and say it as you see it, and be comfortable in who you are. At the end of the day, none of us is fucking perfect, and if we can all accept our own faults and deal with them to the best of our ability and be aware of them, then yeah, what else can we ask? Open minds. And Dave, how you got critical questions tomorrow?
Yes.
At what time UK? Are we going back to 1 or are we doing 2 p.m?
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock UK time, so take 5 hours away for that from Eastern Standard and everybody else work it out. Randolph, have you got anything else coming up?
Well, actually, I don't know if you know, but Red Venture has done a video and he's working on a series, doing more videos in looking into how Darth Dawkins' Duncan Atheism, his approach to arguments go. And he featured some footage in his first video from your channel, the one where I spoke with Darth Dawkins.
Really?
So this,
what do you call
great.
this person?
Red Venture. I'll send you a link to the video in Twitter later.
Yeah.
Because I think
Copyright strike.
Kevin's music in the background. Did he get rid of Kevin's music? That's the whole reason the music exists.
But yeah, so that it's great. Your channel's getting more well known, and it's fantastic to see. So I'm very happy to see your channel doing so well. And congratulations on a booming success. Compared to me, you're a booming success.
I wouldn't go so far as saying a booming success, man. And even just that link that you sent me that had all the educational stuff for young kids and being able to show my daughter.
Oh yeah.
That alone, I've only shown her once and she walked away. But I'll get around and we'll watch more, okay? But having that ability and that access, everything that you just said, I appreciate that. But that small one link that you've given me will, affect my daughter's life and give us time together. So I really appreciate that, man. I really do. So fuck YouTube and all the rest of it. Having that resource that you give me is fantastic.
I am just so delighted to hear that. Feel free to share that with others too. It's
Publicly. Well, you shouldn't be delighted to hear that she ran away from the first time I put it on. We'll wait for a week. I'll try
No. No,
Drop it to me, Math, because I've got a few people I want to pass it on to, if you don't mind.
Yes,
I can send it to you as well.
Yeah, that works.
So you're wondering what I have coming up. Well, I am going to be in a conversation with Steve McCrae. He wants to educate me on the meaning of the word atheism.
Oh God,
so I think,
no. Right, well, hold on.
That
Did
will
you
be
watch that video you were recommended to watch?
Oh, no, we're not doing that. We're not doing
and then after that, I'm probably going to be having a chat with Bad Tempered Badger. So he says he needs some help with scheduling. So I'll do what I can there.
Yeah,
Have you spoken to him today?
Have I spoken with what?
Badger today.
I didn't hear what you said. I'm sorry.
Have you spoken with Badger today?
Not today. That was yesterday I spoke with him.
His computer blew up this morning.
Yeah.
Oh.
Oh dear.
And saying that, if you need anything to host or produce it or anything like that, just set it up and send me a stream key. As long as it's within the right hours, Randolph, or Badger, or I can do that. It's not a bother.
Okay. I think Badger already has everything he needs for running things, but if there's a need for someone to moderate a conversation or something, I'll gladly.
Oh no, I mean like if his computer's broke and you still want to have the hangout, then I can run everything and you can just on his YouTube channel or not on here, on your channel or his channel.
Oh, great. For him to he's going to need a working computer in order to participate in this, I would think.
Well, you can do it off a phone.
No, he's got a laptop he can use to connect. I just not convinced he can run a stream from it.
No, we're tangenting. We're tangenting.
We are.
Bill, have you any sign of the little doggo and your little doggo channel coming?
That won't happen until after the lockdown and everything's finished, unfortunately.
Yeah. Do you know what's funny? In this country, the lockdown didn't close the off licenses, but Easter Sunday did. It's illegal for the off licenses in this country to be open on Easter Sunday, but for Covind, they were classed as an essential service.
It's the first time MathPig got angry about the lockdown.
No, I'm fine. I'm grand. Don't worry about me.
What is the off license?
An off license would be a liquor store.
Oh, that's called an off license. Okay, here we just say licensed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Funny.
License
Anyway.
has a license to
off the premises.
sell out.
We've got Sal in the background here. Sal, do you want? Sal's got lots of stuff going on at the minute. Sal, do you want to let us know about all your fantastic artwork?
No. Hey guys, how are you? That was a great stream. Fantastic. I've just been zoned out working.
You're still on the stream. We haven't ended it yet. Do you want to let it?
I know that, but prior to this, an IQ pleasure.
Much obliged.
Brilliant.
It was I just been zoned out to it. Like I got a lot done actually.
I bet you Dave's very happy. Right, well everybody, check out Sal. Sal's going to be making a wee bit more of a bigger thing on the scene now in the next couple of months or so. So definitely watch out for Eases and Works, and you'll be seeing his artwork and his t-shirts and stuff popping up all over the place. So definitely keep an eye out for everybody here. I'm sure IQ, even though he's in chat, and Dave, even though they're in the chat, will be posting that in links in the live chat for everybody. So I really do appreciate you all coming around. Thanks very much, and yeah, oink and out.
Oink, guys.
Thank you, MathPig.
See you, MathPig.